Welcome back to Bold TV. I'm Philip Michael, and today we're going to talk about the global economy. Now, things here in America are looking up, and we're opening up. Masks are coming off. Wish I had one that I could throw right now. And companies are hiring, but it isn't the same across the globe. So we're going to talk to an expert in global economics about the state of the world in 2021. Joining us is Dr. Christian Busch. He directs the CGA Global Economy Program at New York University and is the author of the book, The Serendipity Mindset. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy for you to be here. Now, even though the United States is starting to get things going again, do you still think the global economy will be in trouble for the remainder of the year?
You know, what I find fascinating from a mindset perspective is thinking about how we all had this collective near-death experience last year, where everyone's like, wow, life can be over very quickly. And so I think, we will only see the long-term implications of this in a lot of different areas, I think, in the years to come. What I'm most fascinated by and why I'm so interested in mindsets at the moment is that I think we see large shifts in terms of how we think about business, how we think about the economy, how do we make it more inclusive, how do we understand that something like COVID, right? I have students who, they tuned in from their Florida mansion and they were fine. And then I had students who had 10 family members in the room and couldn't really focus. And I think, so the virus hit people extremely unequally. And so I think it's also been hopefully pushing a lot of thinking into the direction of how do we make sure that our system is more inclusive, especially when those shocks hit.
Yeah, it's because it's really interesting whenever you have a global macro event of this magnitude, what it tends to do once you separate emotion from the facts is that it tends to accelerate innovation and also evolution. Every time there seems to be a crash or a big macro event, immediately is followed by either prosperity, innovation, new technologies. And that seems to be what I saw when you talk about mindset. And people seem to be, people are understanding that life is fickle. It could be over at any time. Let's make something happen. You've seen so many things come out on the other side of the pandemic. But before we touch on the mindset side of things, places like Canada and England are having a hard time with the vaccines. What can we do here to help the world get going again?
It's a great question because I think in a way crises always push people back into those kind of fight or flight type, we are on our own, we are fighting for our citizens and everyone else is on their own. And I think, one of the big pushes I do hope that we're seeing now is in a way there's, I think, a lot of, behind the scenes ideas of how countries could work together better, especially with developing countries. Right? I think the big question, how India, for example, is able to cope with COVID and how we can make sure that we use the resources we have to really be part of it. And I think, you're touching on the bigger point behind this, right? I think it's extremely short-sighted to think just because we get something down in the US, it means that actually, the rest of the world doesn't matter. I think from an ethical perspective, that's a problem, but also from the perspective of that the mutants that happen in India and other places, they might come back at some point. So it's an enlightened self-interest to really kind of help out other countries as well. And I think that's at the core of development policy, right? To say it's both the right thing to do, but also it's actually in our own self-interest.
Yes, exactly. Now, the serendipity mindset. Again, the mindset with, the global events that happen like this, and it will accelerate innovation, evolution, people will come out, fight or flight. What does the serendipity mindset mean? If you can have a healthy mindset, what is that exactly?
Well, the thing is, over the last 10 years, I've worked a lot with leaders from across different areas. And what I found fascinating is that the most inspiring, purpose-driven, successful people seem to have something in common, which is that they intuitively see something the unexpected, connect the dots, and turn it into unexpected positive outcomes. And so that is what we, consider to be serendipity. And I think, a lot of times we think about luck as kind of the luck that just happens to us, right? The blind luck, being born into a good family, things we can't influence, right? But the cool thing about serendipity is about smart luck is that actually we can do something about it. We can make accidents more meaningful, so we can connect the dots out of something unexpected happening, but also we can create more meaningful accidents. And that's how up to 50% innovations happen, right? That's how something like Viagra comes about. That's how you meet the love of your life, right? It's unexpected moments, but you had to work for it. And so it's really that kind of active smart luck that's super fascinating, especially at the moment, because we need that, right? That's how you turn a a brewery into a hand sanitizer company, because they use the alcohol differently, right? You connect the dots differently.
You mentioned connecting the dots when there's an opportunity and the successes that you see. What's a really good example outside of the one that you just mentioned now, but one that people may see? I'm like, oh my God, that is a manifestation of the serendipity mindset, as you place it. What is a good example of that?
two examples, one individual, one organizational. In terms of the individual is, if you have erratic hand movements like I do, imagine you're in a coffee shop and you spill coffee over someone.
Yes.
Right? And you sense there might be some kind of connection with that person. You don't know what it is, you just sense there might be something there.
Yes.
Now you have two options, right? Option number one is you say, I'm so sorry, here's a napkin, you walk outside and you think, what could have happened had I spoken with the person? And then option two is you start a conversation and that person turns out to become your co-founder, the love of your life, whatever it is. It is your reaction to that unexpected moment that made that accident meaningful or not. But also then in the company context, one of my absolute favorites is there's a company in China I've been doing a lot of work with, and they produce washing machines and refrigerators. And they had farmers call up and they said, hey, we're trying to wash our potatoes in your washing machine and somehow it doesn't seem to work. And so what would we usually do when something unexpected like this happens? We would say, well, don't wash your potatoes in the washing machine. It's not made for that, right?
Right.
They did the opposite. They said, you know what? That is unexpected, but there's a lot of farmers in China who might have similar problems. So why don't we build in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? And that's how unexpectedly the potato washing machine emerged as a product. And again, that's the example of, a lot of innovation happens that way, that something goes wrong, like in the example of Viagra, right, where they gave someone medication and something unexpected happens in male participants' trousers. And instead of just saying, oh my God, that's embarrassing or that's bad, that's a problem, they say, maybe there's something in there and maybe we can do something with it.
Right. Maybe there's a huge opportunity there. At the core of what you're saying, it seems to be that the inception of these successes come from a mindset point of view, how someone responds. Because you mentioned you spill coffee, oh my God, let me cower, I should have did this, which is what you see a lot of times when people can recognize opportunity, they don't act. The ones that do, they act. Okay. Does it really boil down to how you deal with adversity and how you deal with quote unquote bad things in your life? Is that really what it is?
That's a great question because to your point, right, serendipity a lot of times comes out of tough situations, right? It comes out of a company almost being bankrupt and then saying, well, we always sold to restaurants our produce or our alcohol produce, and now we can't do that anymore. But hey, maybe we can use that as hand sanitizer and become a hand sanitizer company, right? You could have taken that situation as, oh my God, life is over, and now we're bankrupt. Mm-hmm. Or you can say, you know what, maybe there's still something in that moment that we can do with it. And, I had COVID last year, a severe form of it, and it's kind of these meaningless kind of, you feel like it's completely meaningless in that situation. But I reread a book that is one of my absolute favorites, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is all about how do you find meaning in the toughest of circumstances? Because if you try to reframe that situation, there's always something you can still do. And I think his idea is, so timely, essentially that idea that we cannot always pick the situation, but we can always pick our response to it. And that is our freedom, our liberty, and that is serendipity.
Again, someone who has disciplined and trained themselves to develop that habit to respond favorably to when shit happens, and then they can turn that into opportunity. That is a real skill. How do people learn how to dig themselves out of negative thinking in a bad situation and instead look at it, look, you know what? Maybe life is stress testing me. Maybe this is really a signal that there's a growth opportunity here. How do you develop that type of thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two pieces to it. The one is really to say, how do we essentially take perspective? How do we take ourselves emotionally out of the situation, look at it and almost, ask, hey, what would I advise a friend to do?
Yes.
Because whenever we do that, then in a way we say, oh, actually, I would probably tell a friend, hey, there's this one thing that's still possible, right? So I think it's kind of really taking ourselves out of it a little bit, thinking about it from that perspective. And that's kind of really turning that around and thinking about how can I make the best out of what is at hand, rather than thinking about what do I need at this point only. But one of the things that I think is extremely fascinating about serendipity also is that it's about making these accidents meaningful, but also creating more meaningful accidents. And that's really about saying, how do I seed dots so that other people can connect them? So for example, there's a friend of mine in London called Ollie Barrett. When you asked him this dreaded question, what do you do? He wouldn't just say, I'm a technology entrepreneur. He would say, I'm a technology entrepreneur, recently started reading into the philosophy of science, but what I'm really excited about is playing the piano. What he's doing here is he's casting three potential hooks.
Yes.
Where you could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. We recently started hosting piano matinees. You should stop by. Oh my God, such a coincidence. My sister is teaching the philosophy of science. You should be a guest speaker. The point is we can reflect on what are our key interests and seed them into every conversation, every interaction. And by doing this, we allow other people to connect the dots for us and create serendipity.
That is really interesting because in a very concise statement, you literally articulated 3 aspects of your life right there. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but what do you do outside of work? And most people go, well, I'm passionate about my work. But there are really other elements to you. And that was really a brilliant way of doing that. If anybody watching that, I would recommend bringing that into your intellectual arsenal. Now, Christian, what's next for you?
You know, it's something, the last 10 years of my life have been focused very much on how do we essentially, turn uncertainty and the unexpected from a threat into an ally? How do we essentially, a lot of the things we talked about today, especially relevant in COVID, right? How do we essentially navigate this fast changing world and decrease anxiety and see that there can be joy in the unexpected from time to time? There can be something like innovation in that. And so I've dedicated the next years of my life to say, this content that we have around the serendipity mindset, how do we take them to curricula, into companies, into organizations, and really in a way make it a daily practice? Because it's one thing to do a little bit of these exercises, but the deeper underlying psychological questions are really about what is holding me back in this coffee shop situation. Is it fear of rejection? Is it that I have an inner imposter here? Most of us will have an inner imposter that always says, no, you're not worthy, you're not there yet, you're not this. And so I think, I'm really fascinated by the psychological dimensions around it also, to say, how do we overcome these self-limiting constraints? Because there's so much, we have to do around inequality in general. Of course. And then at the same time, we have to work on mindset. So it's kind of those two going hand in hand.
Yes, and I think it's a really interesting point. I think we can end on that note, but I think it's a really interesting point because most of our actions are a function of what we believe back here unconsciously, or unconscious belief, like you mentioned, the self-limiting constraints. I read this quote: if more information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with 6-packs. Now, as you mentioned in that example of spilling the coffee, the person intellectually and logically knows, oh my God, I should have done this, but I did not. So that behavior isn't a product of not knowing what to do, but not feeling, for whatever reason, that this was the right thing to do. So I really, truly think you got something right there of treating the underlying condition, which is whatever the habitual system that exists there, or the dots that are connected back there in an unhealthy way, or the processes, whatever you want to call it, the cycles, and replacing them with healthy ones. And I think that could really be a game changer if it gets into the school system. Are you going to bring it into schools?
Schools, high schools, I think the earlier we start, the better, right? Because that's, in a way, the patterns we create throughout our life, right? And so, absolutely.
That really makes me excited for humanity. It's one of the things that I do daily on Instagram. I put out money information, but it's not exactly the information that is the key. Oh my God, I'm like sharing like secrets here. But it's not about the information. It's how the information is presented in a way that you feel that is obtainable, where you did not feel like that before. What this does also, it creates like this a byproduct, almost like an effect where, a high, if you will. So you want to do it again and again. And I think by doing some of these things where, oh my God, I wasn't afraid of rejection, nothing bad happened here, and people build confidence, and I think this could be a big game changer. So I'm excited. Where can I read more about this, Christian? How can I follow this journey?
Yeah, well, the homepage is serendipitymindset.com. So there's all the different links. And yeah, delighted to connect with everyone who's thinking about these themes. And to your point, right, I think that's at the core of it, to have small behavioral changes rather than, oh my God, we have to directly take on and change everything. It's really these small steps, right? Asking one different question per day, reacting, slightly different to a challenge, thinking, is there one thing I can do about this? And then by doing this, it becomes such a normal way of life that we do that more and more intuitively. In that way.
Precisely. You don't get buff overnight from doing 100 bench presses. You do 10 every day for 10 years. Whatever the case is, it's all about that consistency. Christian, thank you so much for being here. Such an insightful conversation. Can't wait to hear what happens next.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching. Make sure you follow Bold TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Until next time, have it great. And make sure you watch this back so you get all the information we just talked about. Again, until next time, I'm out of here.